So this week's real estate topic is going to be the 3 things you must know about the Rhode Island cesspool phase out. A, it's a big deal. There's 25,000 homes in Rhode Island that are going to be affected by this. B, you need to have the cesspool replaced with a septic system or connected to sewer if available within 12 months of purchase. And C, the costs range between $15,000 and $60,000 to do this. Okay, so there was legislation that was approved, and this starts January 1st of 2016. Is anybody excluded from this? Yes. So who is it? Well, it's basically family, direct family. Like if you sell your house to a spouse, I don't know why you'd be doing that, but if you would sell your house to a spouse, or if you would sell it to a brother or a sister, or anything like that, direct family is exempt from that. Now, I said there's 25,000 cesspools in the state. That's quite a lot. That's a lot of homes. So what happens to these 25,000 people that can't, let's just say some of these people can't afford to switch these out before they sell, or the buyer can't afford to switch it out when they buy. So what are they going to do? What exactly can you do if you've got this huge gorilla, 15,000 between 60,000? And by the way, the higher end ones are usually by high water tables, environmentally sensitive areas. Okay, you need different systems around there to make sure that the waste is not leaching into public waterways or into our water supply. And this is why we're actually getting rid of cesspools. Okay, but so Dan, as our mortgage expert on the show, what are people's options? I know it's a pretty convoluted thing.
Yeah, this has been kind of a buzzword lately in the business. I mean, a couple things that I want to strike on. Obviously, this started in 2007, and so you can see how long the system takes to really kick things in. But people have had 8 years to do this, and most people didn't even know. The average person, I mean, I just sold the property that you sold for me, that had a cesspool. In Coventry, it had a septic and a cesspool, but one of the bathrooms was on that cesspool, and that buyer is going to have to eventually replace that cesspool now. Some of the big caveats to this also are, if you're within 200 feet of inland edge of shoreline features bordering tidal water areas, if you're within 200 feet of public wells, if you're within 200 feet of a water body that can be considered drinking water, this has to be done immediately.
Yes.
So they're not going to have a choice. And what's going to happen to some buyers and to people who own and sellers, you're going to have these problems. And the solutions to those problems are going to have to be thought up between the realtors, between the companies that are going to replace these, between the buyer, between the seller. There's going to need to be some thought process behind this on all ends. I have a client right now that's looking to purchase a property, and it has a cesspool. And she came to us, and the realtor, myself, and her all sat down together, and we came up with this plan where the first step of the plan was she should not buy this home if it has a cesspool, because in several months, she's going to be responsible for $15,000 to get this thing replaced, which she doesn't have. So we looked at a couple different routes. One, the first thing that they said to me was, why don't we just get a credit?
Yeah.
Let's get a credit, and the attorney can keep an escrow, $10,000 or $15,000 to replace that. Some loans do not allow for that. The Federal Housing Administration is not going to allow for you to escrow money for repairs.
That's your 3.5% down program, FHA.
FHA, correct. That's also the one that we use for the 100% program in the 105.
Rhode Island
Rhode Island Housing, correct. Now, some conventional lenders will allow you to escrow a certain amount of money, but not all will. It's still the discretion of the underwriter.
Yep.
So you can't just jump into it and say, I'm going to be all set. My buyer gave me, my seller gave me a $15,000 credit, and my attorney's going to be holding $15,000, because that may not work. And there's nothing worse than being in this purchase and sales room and then finding out that you're going to pull out. It's bad for the seller. It's bad for the buyer. The solution that we came up to, and maybe we can help, Emilio, you and I can help some of our sellers out there that do have cesspools. We worked with a local septic and cesspool company, and they agreed to do the work and invoice at the closing. So they said, we'll come in, we'll take out the cesspool or fill it in or whatever they do. We'll put in a new septic system, and we will send an invoice to you. And when you close on that purchase, the seller will pay it through the proceeds.
Sure.
So it's not a credit. It's not an enticement. That was
I like that idea.
That's what we came up with. And again, I think working with people like with John at Go Fix It, I think maybe he can do things like that for us. And I don't think every company is going to be willing to do that because as a business owner, it's very difficult to say, well, I'll do all this work and then I'll get my money later. We all know it's expensive to do those work. But some companies are going to be able to do that for us. And I think if we're working with them and if the buyer has a good pre-approval, and we're having that conversation because I had to have a conversation with the owner of that company and I had to explain to him, yes, I've checked this, I've checked that, I've checked this, and I know that this seller can buy this, this buyer can buy this home. And that you will get paid.
They've got to be in the right program, though. That's the moral of the story. So if you have a house with a cesspool, okay, you're gonna and you're thinking of selling that house, okay, you don't have to replace that yourself. The buyer can replace that. So if you've gotten information that says you have to have that replaced before you sell, that is inaccurate.
Completely inaccurate.
Inaccurate. So I want you to know your facts. This is a huge thing. You could be spending anywhere from $15,000 to $60,000. However, when you put that house on the market, you're going to have to price it accordingly if it has a cesspool because buyers are going to know that they're going to have to switch it out. So
that's the next step I wanted to talk about, the other option. With an FHA 203K loan.
Okay.
Rehab loan. So that was the route we were going to go if they were not willing to invoice for us. The purchase price on this particular property, they wanted to sell it for $200,000.
Yep.
They said $200,000 and we're going to escrow $15,000 away for you. So they were going to net $185,000.
Yep.
So my suggestion to them, if this company wasn't willing to invoice, was why don't we sell it for $185,000?
Okay.
And do a 203K because they're going to $15,000, $20,000, whatever the case may be. The seller still nets the same amount. The buyer still pays the same amount. And you can get it done. There are ways to get around this. The people that I really feel for, Emilio, are the elderly, the couples that have owned their home for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And when they first bought it, their taxes were $1,200 a year or $900 a year, whatever it was back then, and their property was probably only worth $20,000 or $30,000. But today, somehow, because everything's got built up around them, their property's worth $300,000, and they don't care what it's worth because they don't owe anything on it. But now they're paying $6,000, $7,000 a year in taxes. They're on Social Security. They can't afford to get this fixed. That's where we can come in with refinances, and that's part of my segment later on in our show today, talking about what refinancing can do for you and the benefits besides just that monthly savings that you see up front.
That's great. You're going to want to tune in for that. That's later on in our show. But, there's some really great points here, and it's like we said, it's such a convoluted thing, so you're going to want to make sure you get professional advice. We're always here to help you out. You can check it out. Check this information out on theroundtableradio.com. Again, theroundtableradio.com.
Before we go, I want to point out one more important thing. This goes way back to our segment when we were talking about Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac selling these foreclosed properties.
Yep.
On foreclosures, if you're buying a foreclosure, this is something you may want to negotiate with Fannie Mae ahead of time.
Have them do it.
Because they don't have to do it, but I think if everybody started saying, hey, Fannie, no, we're done with this. We're not going to continue to buy houses that you don't legally own. We're not going to continue to sit around for 6 months while you try and figure out a foreclosure. And no, we're not going to buy your ridiculous amount of inventory that you have sitting on the market right now that's been foreclosed, that's sitting vacant, that have all these cesspools, because that's going to be the next step in the process.
Yeah.
They're going to look at how many of these they have, and they're going to go, uh-oh. We have to do something about it. And I'm sure they're going to start dumping these properties as fast as they can.
Absolutely.
So if you're buying a Fannie Mae foreclosure, make sure you check and see if it has a cesspool ahead of time because you don't want to get caught with a $15,000 bill a year later.